All right, everybody, welcome to this special episode of Trad Watch. Good to be here with all of you this day after the Feast of the Kingship of Christ. We are joined tonight by our distinguished gentleman guest, Catholic Esquire. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Stephen. This is great.
Yeah, it's been a while since we had our first show together, and I know there was a lot of positive reaction to that, and it's good to have you here.
Well, there's just so much going on in the church. I mean, if we're going to talk about this stuff and all the craziness, the insanity, the rot, I mean, you have to have at least once a month, maybe get together. That'd be good. So,
yeah. Absolutely. And we'll get into that. I want to just give a quick shout out to our sponsor here, Florida Low Carb Direct Primary Care, located in the Sunshine State and run by a devout traditional Catholic. Florida Low Carb recognizes we are temples of the Holy Spirit and not guinea pigs meant to be tested on by Big Pharma. Go to lowcarbdpc.com to learn more. It's a great organization there run by a devout traditional Catholic who I know, and had to give a quick shout out there at the beginning. But, today is the day after the Feast of Christ the King. And this is one of those feast days that the Vatican II Church really hates. It strove very mightily with Dignitatis Humanae to really discard the church's teaching on the kingship of Christ. And, there's a lot of people who will say, well, the council still allows for the kingship of Christ. You just have to read this paragraph in that way. I mean, you wrote a Substack on this not long ago, actually a couple of years, but you re-shared it this week. I want to give you a chance to talk about that. What did you bring up in that Substack?
Okay. Yeah, I did. So on Substack, and you can find me at Catholic Esquire on Substack. Just type in my name. I reposted an article I previously done for the CatholicEsquire.org website. Basically, the point of the article is this. So yesterday, October 26th, as you know, is the Feast of Christ the King on the traditional calendar.
Mm-hmm.
The new calendar, according to Pope Paul VI, actually got rid of the Feast of Christ the King. Now, the Feast of Christ the King was instituted in 1925 by Pope Pius XI. And the purpose of the Feast of Christ the King, as instituted by Pope Pius XI, was to make the point that Christ's kingship isn't just a spiritual thing, which it is. It isn't just the fact that Christ is going to come at the end of the world and reign, which he is. The point of Christ, the Feast of Christ the King, is Christ's social kingship, the social kingship of Christ the King. And what that means is that Christ, his law, must govern our secular society in the world today, the world we live in. The governments, the culture, everything we do must be ultimately governed by Christ the King. There is no such thing as separation of church and state. There is no idea of separating culture from our faith life or hiding in a closet to separate our faith and keeping it out of the public square. That was the point of the social kingship of Christ. And that's what Pope Pius XI wanted to get across, and instituted this feast day to make sure to emphasize that. And it's a big feast day. I mean, it is a big deal. Well, what happened was, after Vatican II, of course, Pope Paul VI removed the feast. He got rid of it.
Did he remove it, or did he just relocate it to a different?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people think he just moved it, because if you go to a Novus Ordo church today, well, yesterday was the 30th Sunday of Ordinary Time. Well, they do have this solemnity of Christ the King, King of the Universe, at the last Sunday right before Advent. But a lot of people think, well, he just moved it, for whatever, because he wanted to focus on the eschatological part of it. No. What he did was he actually replaced the Feast of Christ the King with a new feast day that completely gets rid of this notion of the social kingship of Christ. Now, I've been critical of Dr. K before, and he has some issues, especially when it comes to Vatican II. But he did a really good job, and I linked to him. You can check it out. He did a good job of pointing out the fact that it was a replacement. If you read the words of Paul VI, he specifically said he's replacing the Feast of Christ the King with this new feast.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you look at the liturgy and you look at the readings for the new Mass on that day, they completely are all changed, and they remove any notion that Christ has any authority, any power in this world today. And if you know anything about the modernist agenda, their program, it fits right in with it, because what is the modernist agenda? What is the Vatican II agenda? You talk about it all the time, Stephen. It's man worship.
Yep.
So we worship man, we worship governments, we worship cultural icons, we worship anything except Christ in this world today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they had to get rid of the social kingship of Christ, because it was embarrassing to them.
Yeah.
It was embarrassing to the modernists when they would have conferences with Jews. It was embarrassing to the modernists when they'd have conferences with Protestants. It was embarrassing to the modernists when they'd have conferences with atheists, because they can't say all these people are subject to Jesus Christ. It's not ecumenical, yeah. Right?
Well,
so
it reminds me
it all makes sense if you think about it. And
yeah.
So that was the point of my article.
Yeah, I mean, go and read it. We'll put that in the description of today's show. And it reminds me of when Archbishop Lefebvre, in his recollection, I think he was actually talking with both. Well, I think it was John Paul, and Lefebvre said something about the kingship of Christ, and it was in the 80s. And John Paul said, "Well, we have some leeway with the communists now. We can kind of exert some leverage there." And basically, the message was, we don't defend Christ the King anymore, and we get religious freedom from the communists and the liberals. Like, that was the bargain that was struck.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the American Republic is that bargain. I mean, we Christians compromised on that a long time ago here in the United States, and they just said, well, we'll just be satisfied with being another religion among many. And then that's it. But that's not the kingship of Christ. And unfortunately, that's the position the modernists have taken. And now that's the position that people in the Novus Ordo parishes think that's what Christ the King is all about.
Yeah. If you're gonna put out a tweet on this, he issued multiple tweets on this. Actually, it was like literally like he was going all out and reminding everybody of what the traditional feast means. And here's the quote, where is the one that I thought was worthy of being retweeted. "Even the feast of Christ the King was disfigured. Its date moved to the end of the liturgical year, taking on an eschatological significance, Christ the King of the world to come, but not of earthly societies, because the lordship of the incarnate word supposedly represented an obstacle to dialogue with contemporary man and the idol of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights." Right. Exactly right.
It takes absolutely no guts and no courage to say, well, Christ will come at the end of the time and then rule. Yeah, it takes no courage. It does take courage to say, Christ reigns now. The gospel rules now. Our governments, our politicians, they must submit to the rule of Jesus Christ, which means we can't have abortion, we can't have the gay marriage, we can't have all these things that the culture is opposed to, because that's uncomfortable, that's hard to do, and that's not going to it's not going to make them look good when they attend the cocktail parties with all the Hindus and all the other religions who reject Jesus Christ. Yeah. So that's the problem. That's the problem with Vatican II. It's all connected, interconnected.
Yeah. Cardinal Bea, he was the head guy for the Christian Unity, and it's completely misnomer. That's not what that commission at Vatican II did. Cardinal Bea this is why he was so insistent on fighting Ottaviani's document on religious tolerance and instituting instead his own document on religious liberty, because they all understood you can't have ecumenism if you don't have religious liberty for everybody. And to those who are watching who will say, well, Vatican II didn't actually give up the kingship of Christ. How was the council actually implemented in the years after? All you have to do is look at how it was implemented to see this is essentially how it was meant to be enforced. And the Vatican demanded the concordats that were in place until then in Spain and elsewhere to give those up. And again, who was in charge from 79 until 03, 05? When did John Paul die? And then Benedict was in charge till 2013, right? I mean, that's over 30 some years of conservative Vatican II implementation. I mean, this is how best case scenario the council was enforced and implemented. And so anyone who wants to say, well, it actually upheld the kingship of Christ, well, name one person other than Lefebvre was actually talking about this after the council.
Well, and wasn't it Spain? Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen. You probably know. Wasn't it Spain that repealed the acknowledgement or the law that said Catholicism was the religion of the state in Spain?
I think it was more than Spain. I mean, it was others.
But didn't Spain specifically say we're doing this because Vatican II? I can't remember. I thought it was one of those countries. It might have been Spain, but they specifically said, well, the church's position has changed on this, so we don't feel we have to be a Catholic country anymore. It's nothing but bad fruit. It's all bad fruit. Yeah.
Well, it's a sort of something that we wish would obviously change, but we're still defending it here. But the big news, so let's get into kind of the heart of the show. And everybody watching, thanks for being here. Send a comment or chat in the chat. We'll put it up on screen if we have time to answer those questions. Otherwise, we'll save them mostly to the end. We're at 175 viewers right now. Thanks everybody for being here. And so obviously the Summorum Pontificum pilgrimage just ended this past weekend. I know you've been paying attention to a lot of that. My big takeaway, because I did a show on this Sunday night, and I tried to keep it pithy. I guess like my big takeaway is this was a big LARP. It was a live action role play. It's like the Renaissance fairs that people go to. You get dressed up and you look like a goofball out there, and you're trying to like live in the 1500s, right? And I think that's just what this is, because it's not Catholicism, traditional Catholicism defending the faith itself. It's just dressing up and looking nice. And really it was an audition for Leo, because again, the argument is he doesn't have all the facts about the trads, so we got to put our best face forward. I mean, how did you see this past weekend unfolding? And we'll get to some of the reactions of everybody else in just a moment. But what's your initial takeaway?
Well, my initial takeaway is that, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous to think that you would have a mass in order to educate the man who claims to be the Pope of the Catholic Church. I mean, are we really having to educate Leo on what the traditional Latin Mass is? I mean, are we seriously doing that? Or maybe are we trying to educate him to show how popular it is and that people love it so much? Is that the idea? I mean, obviously, I have no, putting aside the fact of whether the church needed to be reconsecrated or not before the mass happened. Mm-hmm. Put that aside.
There was an exorcism, I think, of some cardinal older cardinal, but yeah.
Yeah, and there's been several things, not just the LGBT stuff that happened. There's been other things, obviously. Yeah. Put that aside. Obviously, there's not a problem with having a traditional Latin Mass at St. Peter's. Obviously, that is the Mass that should be said there, clearly. No one's saying it isn't. The question is what is it's the message, the propaganda that's being associated with this and being promoted by those like Michael Matt and Trad Inc. and those other guys who are trying to tell people that this is somehow a movement forward, and somehow we're making headway with Leo, with the modernists, and as if it's like some victory or something. It's not. And that was my initial reaction, because at the same time all of this is going on, across the street or whatever it is, there's a huge 3-day Synodality conference, workshops, the whole thing. They're going to issue a document. They had their own mass in St. Peter's the following day, which Leo actually attended and presided over, and gave one of what's being said now, and I saw some guy called it on social media, the Magna Carta of homilies from Leo, if you can believe that. The Magna Carta of homilies. And the whole thing was based on promoting synodality, which is completely contrary to real Catholicism. So the idea that, this is some sort of victory or whatever is ridiculous. What it is just a confirmation that they're willing to put traditional Catholics in the same pool of other religions, of the Hindus, of the the Taoists, of the African pagan religions, of the Pachamama cult. You're just another player in this broad scheme of one world religion, and we'll entertain you for your specific amount of time if you show up or whatever, just like we're going to entertain the next religion that wants to come in and do their thing, like the Anglicans, which they also have had permission to do their own thing in the so do you understand what I'm saying, Stephen? That's what I'm trying to get across, is like, this isn't a victory. All you're doing is you're actually giving up any leverage you have in submitting to this synodal, modernist, conciliar cult that's hijacked Rome and the Vatican.
Jerome's got a pretty good comment here. The TLM with Burke is simply window dressing to give people false hope, a side altar in the conciliar church. I think that's I want to bring up Chris Jackson's article on this. He wrote, as usual, a fairly good analysis of what actually happened here. A Latin mass for the cameras, while Leo the 14th says the old faith is over. And he says it was a sight both glorious and hollow. Cardinal Burke, flanked by torchbearers, etc., walked into St. Peter's. Incense rose from Bernini's bronze clouds as he offered the pontifical mass of the ages. He goes on. The crowd rejoiced, the cameras clicked, and at the same time, Leo was presiding over, as you said, the jubilee of synodal teams and participatory bodies. I mean, can we get some better marketing, at least for these guys? That's a lot of jumbled words there. Wow. Preaching that no one possesses the whole truth. That was another scandalous comment we'll get to in just a second. The message from Rome was clear. The old mass can appear on stage again, but only as a curated artifact, a prop of unity for a church that has redefined itself. And I think that's at the heart of the matter here, which is why I said in my podcast on Sunday night that, like Latin Mass trads, and I think that is a thing, Latin Mass-ism, it's just about the Latin Mass, and that's a problem, are being treated like pro-lifers in the Republican Party, right? They will have some show votes, right? Lindsey Graham will vote, get an A+ rating from a number of these places, and then the next day he'll vote to send bombs to go kill innocent children in Ukraine. And this is how easy it is to appease trads right now, because they've been so starved of just a Latin Mass for so long, is you give them some nice vestments, everybody says we're back. You give them one Summorum Pontificum pilgrimage with Cardinal Zuppi, by the way, was there, leading Vespers on Friday, and they think it's a historic thing. Like, I think that's the way they need to realize they're just being toyed with, really.
Yeah, and great. I want to give you props too. Great job on your video earlier today, where you kind of break down that Cardinal Zuppi's background.
Yeah.
Yeah, if y'all are listening, check out Stephen's video earlier today about that. That's actually really good, because you break down who Cardinal Zuppi is, what he's about.
He's basically a Freemason. I mean, let's be honest. Like, he was endorsed by a Freemason. He married the top Freemason in Rome. I mean, I don't know what that guy's doing here. He's a pro-LGBT cardinal, and everybody knows it.
Yeah, but I think Jerome brings up a good point, though, because it does give, and I don't think it's like Cardinal Burke had any ill will or malice or anything by doing this. And I don't really think he was trying to give people false hope, but I think the point is that when you promote it as if you're making some sort of headway, if you're somehow showing Leo and convincing him that of the beauty of tradition and how we need to go back to the tradition. I think when you start talking like that and promoting those things and incorporating just the Mass as part of your strategy, you're going to give a lot of people false hope. And that's very, very dangerous, I think, because when you start doing those sorts of things, over what happens the next time when another sacrilege happens in St. Peter's that's invited by Leo or whoever's in charge, you're going to completely deflate them, and people lose their faith over this kind of stuff. I mean, they really do. I know people who have literally quit the Catholic Church because they couldn't understand why Francis would teach the things that Francis taught, and they couldn't wrap their brains around it. And the problem is because they didn't have a correct understanding of what the crisis in the church is. If you have a good understanding of what the crisis in the church is, you have to understand what the problem is to begin with. If you understand the problem, then you're not going to necessarily lose hope when things go bad or go south, because you're expecting it and you are prepared to respond to those things.
Mm.
And that's what I think part of the problem is when we focus on the strategy of we're going to get the Latin Mass back as the strategy. You're missing the point. You're missing the problem. You're not understanding what the crisis in the church is. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to be disappointed. Even if you get a permission, and that Mass happened because of permission, let's not kid ourselves.
Mm.
Even if you get permission to say a Latin Mass here or a Latin Mass here. So I do think it is a matter of strategy, and I think it's very. I think to make it completely just about restoring the traditional Latin Mass only as part of the strategy, that's very dangerous, and it gives people false hope. So, yeah, that's part of my problem with what happened in Rome.
One person who has seemingly the inside track on all this, or at least seems to be the guy who at least previously said Leo's speaking in code. I don't mean to be too dismissive of Gavin Ashenden here, but I think those remarks were just patently ridiculous. He wrote this for the Catholic Herald: "The Mind of the Pope, Reflections on the Summorum Pontificum Pilgrimage." And again, speaking about not understanding the issue at hand here, here's the main quote. "This, of course, is not only about liturgy. It is not even a struggle over the Second Vatican Council, though it has been presented that way often enough. The Council never envisaged the suppression of the very Mass it itself used. The conflict is subtler and more sinister. It concerns the way the Council has been appropriated by an anti-Catholic spirit of the age," etc., etc., etc. So again, he's saying here, it's not really about the Council. That's just sort of like Radtrad's making it about the Council. And it's about a weird spirit of the age that kind of has crept in. Now, I got into a little bit of a discussion with Joseph Shaw about, I think, a week ago. I think you probably saw that all the trads who have been wanting the Latin Mass, when it was announced that there was going to be Novus Ordo Masses in Latin, I said, why are you all angry about this? Because you've only been saying it's about the beauty, it's about the spiritual nourishment, it's about the uplifting nature of the Latin Mass. And so what are you upset about if it's about the aesthetics and if it's not about doctrine? And Joseph said out of nowhere, well, no, we think it is more than just the aesthetics. And I just cited several articles that showed no, you're talking about the beauty, the value, etc. And as we see here with Gavin's article, if it's not about the Vatican Council, and if it is just about the beauty, as Cardinal Burke said in his sermon, we'll get to that in just a moment, then you clearly don't get the issue. Don't complain if you're just wanting aesthetics and you get aesthetics.
No, they completely called their bluff on it.
Yeah.
The Leo, the modernists, whatever, they completely called their bluff on it. And they said, that's fine. Well, you can have your incense, you can have your Latin, you can have all the things that you say Vatican II preserves. That's fine. Well, wait a second. Oh, well, then you have to articulate what is the difference between the traditional Latin Mass and the new Mass. And the real difference is not the aesthetics, which that's a part of it, but that's not the substance of the difference. The substance of the difference is the doctrine. What is the Mass? It's a representation of the sacrifice of Christ at Calvary, which is a sacrifice. And it's not a communal meal. It's not a fellowship get together where we all sit around the table and break bread together. That's what the Protestants believe. And that's what the new Mass is. Yeah. But if they talk about that, then they have to admit that there's a doctrinal problem. And the doctrinal problem absolutely stems from the documents of Vatican II. That's part of what my whole mission is to try to get this point across, that the problem is the documents of Vatican II. It was a revolution. They did want to change the Mass because otherwise they wouldn't have had one of their 4 constitutions dedicated to changing the Mass. Right. So God bless Gavin Ashenden. I know he thinks that Leo is secretly talking in code and working for the traditionalists. God bless him. And I really think he might believe that, but we have to live in reality. And if we're going to defend our Lord, right? Yeah. I mean,
want to read this super chat from Sede Picante. Again, thanks for watching, and really appreciate you guys being here. The push me, pull you strategy is in full effect. They will give you one step forward and take two away. The Vatican believes they hold the aces. Bishops for SSPX, Latin Mass for the diocese. And one more thing about Ashendon's article there. Vatican II was an embrace of an anti-Catholic spirit. It was an embrace of liberalism and the modernity that the church had always rejected. Again, it was Benedict, when he was a cardinal in 1984, who said the council attempted to purify the doctrines, or the best elements of the liberal modern world. Okay, so that's blatantly what happened, right? And then Sacrosanctum Concilium, which I know you've gone to bat to expose when Dr. Kwasniewski was on Matt Fradd's show recently. It does say to incorporate elements of the culture and bring it into the liturgy itself. So this is what exactly the document calls for. And I don't know if you want to comment on your response to Dr. Kwasniewski's interview at all, because I know you tweeted about it, and I thought it was pretty good.
Well, yeah, I mean, my only comment was that in his interview, and I actually enjoyed the interview a lot. I thought it was really interesting. But he tried to defend Vatican II and say that none of this, all this abuses we see in the new Mass today have nothing to do with the Vatican II documents. And I'm like, well, of course it has everything to do with the Vatican II documents, because Vatican II is what called for revisions and reformation of the Mass. And so the Mass of 1962, at the time Sacrosanctum Concilium was issued, is what they were reforming. So yes, they did want to change the Mass. Otherwise, they wouldn't have written an entire constitution about it. And then if you read the document, it tells you what they want to change.
No.
So it's ridiculous to say that the documents wanted to keep everything the same. Then why would they even have needed to issue the document?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm writing a book on Vatican II right now. The observers themselves, the non-Catholic observers, and specifically Anglican Bishop John Mormon. Okay, go read his memoirs on Vatican II, and a lot of these guys did write what they observed. Paul Blanchard, who was a secularist and an anti-Catholic journalist in the United States, very popular in the 50s and 60s. He went to Vatican II as well. And he notes all the times the Holy Council Fathers, most of them who were just along for the ride and deceived by the liberals and modernists. It was Mormon who said Sacrosanctum Concilium made the worship of the Roman Church much more closer to that of what we are used to. And that was in 66. He wrote that, 67. That was before like the Novus Ordo was even rolled out. So like, even the most minute reforms of Sacrosanctum Concilium,
right?
That it was enough for them to say, "Oh, this is like exactly what we've always wanted," because it refers to the Mass as a table, as a presiding meal. The priest as a presider. He's not a sacrificer. The community, the congregation are all together. It's like those things add up. And again, as you pointed out, I think in your tweet, like active participation was put above all else. Okay, that was the major thing. So that overrides what the document says about keeping and preserving Latin, etc. Because again, this is what the documents innately have the problem of. They can be orthodox. They can be interpreted in an orthodox manner in both ways, liberals and conservatives. Because the liberals can say, well, it says this, this, and that, and the conservatives can say, well, that, and that. And they're both right, because the documents are contradictory and they're ambiguous and just like allows for multiple interpretations. It's Pandora's box, and everything goes.
Well, I don't think there's no question there's ambiguities in Vatican II. There's no question about it, because what happens is the modernists use words, but then they redefine what the words mean. So a conservative or a traditionalist will see a word like active, or a phrase like active participation, and they'll be like, oh, I don't see a problem with that, because we've always believed in active participation as right. Traditional Catholics. Yeah. Because you go right, because but that's not what the modernists mean by active participation. What active participation means to the modernists is that you're engaging in dialogue with the priests, you're doing hand gestures, you're shaking hands, you're bringing up the gifts to the altar, you're having lay people be lectors, you're having lay people be Eucharistic ministers, you're doing all of these things. You're making it vernacular so people can participate more. That's what they mean. And they tell you that, but you just, but see, you have to read the document very carefully Otherwise, you miss it. So I'm not one to say that the problem with Vatican II is just that it's ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one to say, no, the problem with Vatican II is it teaches error and heresy. And that's what we have to get across. Yes, it has ambiguous things as well, but there are errors and heresies in Vatican II documents. And if you read Sacrosanctum Concilium, all of the stuff you see in the new Mass today, you can point back to a provision, almost to a provision in Vatican II that authorizes it. And that's exactly what the modernists are doing. They're just implementing the council.
Right. I want to hit on one last point here, and then we'll move on to the synod more in depth. This is from Arate Celi blog. They posted Cardinal Burke's sermon at this event, and again, I think a lot of people will just be let down by this. And again, it's not enjoyable to want to have to push back against this, but here's what he said. I am offering the Holy Mass for the faithful in the church throughout the world who labor to safeguard and promote the beauty of the usus antiquor of the Roman Rite. And, he says beauty 4 times. He says that the TLM is another form of the Roman Rite. He says that 4 times. He uses the Antiquitor 3 times. And he mentioned how Christ is King of our hearts. Okay, he mentioned the kingship of Christ, but he mentioned the kingship of our hearts. And it's like, this just reeks of Novus Ordoism. Why do we have to keep referring to it as the old form or the beauty? I thought, again, this is a battle, a crusade about doctrine, and we're fighting for, is this a real counter-revolution? We're just talking about the beauty and the old stuff, and come on. It's missing so much.
Because, Stephen, Summorum Pontificum, Pope Benedict referred to the traditional Latin Mass is the extraordinary form, and the new Mass is the ordinary form, and that they're perfectly fine and can coexist together.
Right.
That's what Pope Benedict said. And so the strategy of trading today, I call it the return to Benedict option, or the return to the Benedict option. We need to get back to. You want to get back to 1958? No, we want to get back to 2007.
Right.
That's what that's our goal. It's a step in the right direction. That's going to be, we just have to take what we can get. Well, the problem is that, yes, Summorum Pontificum authorized every priest to say the traditional Latin Mass, which was a good thing. But the whole thing was premised on the condition that you understand that the new Mass is perfectly fine, and that this is all, and that you must accept Vatican II.
Right.
And so Traditionis Custodes with Francis, his whole argument was, if you read it, was that, hey, Summorum Pontificum was all based on your acceptance of Vatican II. What I found is that a lot of these people celebrating the traditional Latin Mass, they also happen to reject Vatican II, and so therefore I find this is causing disunity, and therefore we have to suppress the traditional Latin Mass. Why? Because does he care about the traditional Latin Mass? No, he doesn't care. Francis never cared about the traditional Latin Mass or what Mass you celebrated. What he cared about was the fact that there were people in the diocesan parishes who were rejecting certain teachings of Vatican II and rejecting the Vatican II agenda and the revolution, and that's what he couldn't have. That's why he wanted to get it out of those parishes. But the whole thing was always based on accepting Vatican II. That was always a condition, even under Benedict. So if you understand that, then you understand what Cardinal Burke, I think, was saying in his sermon.
I like what Lori here says. Another contrived term, extraordinary form. I mean, it's an attempt to salvage. It's like when in Star Wars, when what do they call it, Rentcon? They try to salvage the previous version, which was the previous one. It was so bad, so you try to stitch it up at the end to make it look good. No, we're not doing that.
It's so classic Benedict, and I mean, I do have this kind of place in my heart for Benedict, because I just think the guy, he is a smart man, and he understood the problem, and he was definitely trying to he understood Vatican II is totally incompatible with what happened before. And so he comes up with this whole idea of hermeneutic continuity, complete invention, very Hegelian. Everybody knows he was a Hegelian as a German. And he tried to make it work. And the coming up with extraordinary form versus ordinary form was a way to do that. And on the surface, it seems like, okay, we can live with this. This is like a way to make this work. But in reality, it's not, because it's not based on truth and the ultimate problem of the crisis in the church, which is doctrinal problem. It's a doctrinal problem.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a bit less. I view Ratzinger as one of the leading, revolutionaries. He definitely.
No, he absolutely was. I'm not saying he wasn't. He absolutely was a revolutionary. His whole resignation was based on revolutionary ideas coming out of Vatican II, Karl Rahner, the New Theology. He absolutely was. But all I'm saying is that I think he kind of recognized it and was doing what he could to try to say that it's the same as before, because he recognized the problem, that there was rupture, and tried to say that there wasn't, but there was rupture. Francis basically blew that lid off. I think Francis, to his credit, what credit you can give the man, I think he basically said, no, there is rupture, and you are now being divisive, and that's why he wanted to shut down, and he did attempt to shut down the traditional Latin Mass, because he just admitted there's rupture. Tradition's gone. That's out. All that stuff, all that rigidity, all that ancient medieval stuff, that's in the past. Now we're, the Holy Spirit has enlightened all of us, and now we're a new church. That was Francis. I mean, to that extent, the man was being honest, I think.
Just want to give a quick shout out here to Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. Malachi Martin said that John the 23rd refused to release the third secret because it would have spelled ruin for his ongoing negotiations with Nikita Khrushchev and his plans to have Russian observers present. You have any quick thoughts on that? I don't have any insights on what Martin was getting at there, but obviously John 23rd did have all the Russian Orthodox there, and many of them were KGB agents just parading around as religious, so they infiltrated, and this is why the Vatican II didn't say anything about communism explicitly by name.
As far as I don't know, as far as I understand, there was some sort of a deal cut with the communists in order to ensure that communism would not be condemned at Vatican II. And it wasn't, which is so odd, because you consider 1962, 1965 was like the height of the Cold War.
Yep.
You would, and the entire purpose, supposedly, the council was to talk about, updating the church and in order to relate to what's happening in the world, including politics, and to not even mention it is absolutely bizarre. But it just proves that there was a deal cut.
Yeah, I mean, if the church was serious about it at the time, it would have promoted the Holy Face devotion, which was a gift from our Lord in the 1800s for that specifically, that crime. Sede Picante, Ratzinger's Summorum Pontificum is just a return of John Paul II's attempt to break Lefebvre's SSPX, bait out the rupture with the carrot and complicity with Vatican II. So, I want to move on now to the Synod, which is going on. As you mentioned, it started this past weekend. And unpredictably, Leo has been saying some Francis-like things. And I want to play this short clip. It's a longer one. We'll actually play a couple clips here just to give everybody up to speed on what's happening. So here's what he was saying at Paul VI.
There's a sense of mystery and of understanding of the divine, which is, I think, a part of many of the religions of Asia, that certainly opens the door to different kinds of interreligious dialogue, and I think is of a treasure for the whole church, Eastern and Western, that I also believe is something that is valued by so many cultures in Asia, and that we also, I think, could learn from. And because of that, when we talk about the Spirit, when we talk about the spirit of synodality, when we talk about conversation in the Spirit, there's, if you will, a mystical or contemplative element to that perhaps we could continue to discover. And I don't say understand, because I think it's something that goes far beyond understanding, but a contact with the divine that we can all learn, including from many in Asia.
So that's a new one right there. The spirit of synodality. We got the spirit of Vatican II. We got the spirit of synodality now. And I mean, what's your reaction to that video? I mean, just modernism, right? The contact with the divine is welling up inside of all us. We're all just part of God's children, right?
Yeah, my reaction is, huh? What? What do you?
Yeah.
You know, they talk that way. The modernists love to talk that way. Francis talked that way. And most of it is gobbledygook, and no one really understands what they're saying, but it sounds good, right? It sounds good, and people are like, oh yeah, that's great. Oh, what did he say? What does it mean? How do we implement that concretely? I have no idea, but it was great, and whatever, I submit to it. I don't know. I think the homily that he gave at the Synod Mass on Sunday was
Let me
shockingly bad, shockingly bad. And I noticed a couple of the tweets you're posting there from some of those folks were praising it because it was such beautiful modernism. And he basically encapsulated everything that Pope Pius X condemned, which is why the modernists absolutely love it. So
here's the now this is in Spanish, so we're not going to play the whole thing, but I'll just play it so you can read along. He says, this is the most scandalous part is when he talks about the truth.
Essere Chiesa sinodale significa riconoscere che la verità non si possiede, ma si cerca insieme, lasciandosi guidare da un cuore inquieto e innamorato dell'amore.
So the scandalous part here is that he's saying, and I will give a shout out to Matt Gaspers for really taking a lead on this on Twitter. He put out a great tweet here, and let's bring that up here. No one possesses the whole truth. This is the quote from Leo there. We must all humbly seek it and seek it together. Being a synodal church means recognizing that truth is not possessed but sought together, allowing ourselves to be guided by a restless heart in love with love. And Matt says, this is both false and absurd. Our Lord himself is the truth, John 14, and his church is the pillar and ground of the truth, 1 Timothy 3. Christ solemnly assures us, John chapter 8, if you continue in my word, you shall be my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Now, is there any possibility here of a misunderstanding? I mean, it's just classical modernism where it's just we all get together and the truth just magically appears after we're done working in the kitchen together? Or is there anything else that can really save what he's saying here?
Is there anything else that can save that? I would say no. I'm going to read something to you, Stephen, from the Oath Against Modernism. So that's the oath from Pope Pius X. He developed when he was in the trenches battling modernism back in the first decade of the 20th century. One of the last oath that, and this was an oath all priests were required to take at the time, I believe, of their ordination.
Yes.
And then it was abolished by Pope Paul VI, of course, because it's completely contrary to Vatican II. But one of the last oaths that a priest had to take was this. I'll just read it. It's real brief. I firmly hold then, and shall hold to my dying breath, the belief of the fathers in the charism of truth, which certainly is, was, and always will be, in the succession of the episcopacy from the apostles. The purpose of this is then not that dogma may be tailored according to what seems better and more suited to the culture of each age, rather that the absolute and immutable truth preached by the apostles from the beginning may never be believed to be different, may never be understood in any other way. Mm-hmm. So what he's saying is that the truth is in the possession of the church. That is the apostles, right? That's handed down to us from the apostles, which is sacred tradition. So, yeah, he's violating the oath of modernism. I mean, that's what because of modernism, that's what it is.
In the sermon here, he says, "Dear friends, we must dream of and build a more humble church." This is classic Vatican II, Yves Congar sort of stuff. It's a pilgrim church, a poor church, a learning church, a church that is not stand upright, he says, like the Pharisee, triumphant and inflated with pride, but bends down to wash the feet of humanity. I mean, this this is like Francis on like not even steroids. It's like
Yeah.
COVID vax Francis, like to
Yeah.
the extreme. And I mean, we're stuck with this guy for however long, and I don't know. It's literally insane what he's saying here, and I mean, it's so disappointing to see someone that indoctrinated with this stuff. And I mean,
it's not really insane if you're a modernist and understand modernism and actually what it is. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who are supposed to be defending tradition and all of that don't actually understand what modernism is. Pascendi is not the easiest of documents to read, and it kind of, your eyes kind of glaze over if you don't spend some time with it. But if you do spend time with it, you'll realize that what Leo was talking about in that sermon at the mass on the synodal mass, that is textbook modernism, condemned by Pope Pius X. So, I mean, we're dealing with a real problem here.
Yeah, it's he says here, again, thanks for the super chat, Malone. The supreme rule of the church is love. No one is called to dominate. All are called to serve. No one should impose his or her own ideas. I mean, how is it imposing one's idea when, like Christ lays down the gospel? That's the truth. That's the revealed religion of God himself. It's not imposing anything. It's recognizing like that 2 and 2 is 4, right? Is it imposing math on you? No, it's recognizing the truth of the situation.
Right. So remember, we're in the context of talking about synodality, right? So it's a synodality mass. So his whole point is that he's basically breaking down the hierarchy. He's basically saying you don't need hierarchy to impose these truths on you, which is, oh, hey, by the way, he's talking about tradition, right? So passing down the teachings of the apostles through tradition, through the hierarchy. What he's saying is that no. We have to expand this out now, so we have dialogue with each other, and that we all talk to each other, and through discussion and talking with each other, we can all arrive and we seek the truth. We have to seek the truth, and then we can all arrive at the truth together under the guidance of the Spirit.
Right.
After we dialogue together, because that's the whole synodality thing. And what he's saying is that's why you really don't need, or he at least will concede that the importance of the hierarchy, the structure of the church, the entire structure of the church is not only not necessary, it's a hindrance to ultimately finding that truth that can only be gathered by dialoguing with each other and through imposition of a democracy in the church, because that's what synodality is. That's what he's saying. It's in this sermon.
It seems the next topic he at least he threw a bone to the left recently, and this is how Catholic News Service reported it. It said in their tweet, women deacons are still being studied, but the equal dignity of women and men is clear and must be defended. And Leo did say, I think he quoted like something his mom said one time. It was kind of a phrase from the 70s or something. But I mean, Leo's going to continue appointing women to these high posts in the Vatican. It's a clear thing he's going to keep doing. And, under the auspices of just studying the issue, they'll come up with something, they'll make up some argument that early deaconesses had some authority over situations. And then that's it. And so that's what he's going to do. The evolution of dogma and doctrine are going to continue. And I think that's the next frontier for at least the left.
I'll comment on that too, because I think this is one area though that they're throwing the trad guys off a bit, and they're biting the they're going for it. They're falling for it. Okay. In my opinion, I don't think Francis or Leo really care about ordaining women. I don't think it's on their agenda. I don't think they care about it. It's not that important, because the sacraments really aren't that big of a deal, just like marriage. What they do is they say, well, we just won't ordain the women. That's fine. we're going to just give them power. We're going to give them authority. We're going to appoint
Yeah.
them to positions
Yeah.
of power without the ordination,
I think you're
which
right.
is the same thing they do with the homosexual marriage. They say, "Oh, you don't need the sacrament of marriage." Yeah, of course, that's for only men and women. Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
And they bless
We'll
it.
just bless it. We'll bless the relationship, and that's all they really want at the end of the day. And that accomplishes the agenda of the Vatican II modernist agenda, because you're essentially getting what you want anyway without having to go through all the rigmarole of saying, well, they're getting the sacrament. They don't care about that. It's the power. It's the revolution that matters. That's what I've always said about that.
I think that's really,
I don't know what you think about that, but
no, that's the first time I've actually heard that. And it's, I think you're right. Just coming to think of it, because yeah, it's a sort of clever way around, the messiness of changing doctrine and, the church's official teachings. And that's what liberals and modernists are experts at, is just changing the way it's presented or changing the way it's rolled out in a pastoral
and the Trats
manner.
fall for it. They're like, see, Leo's so conservative. He doesn't want to ordain women. He says they probably shouldn't get ordained, although he's not even saying that really. Francis, I think, said it once. He said, yeah, we're not going to ordain women or something in one of the interviews. And they said, oh, see, he's so conservative. He's upholding the faith or whatever. I'm like, yeah, he's appointing all of these women to control all of the commissions, all of the dicasteries. He's in positions of power over the clergy. He can do that without them being ordained. Don't you understand what's happening here? So
Kilroy says he's a $3 bill, so he's goofy and just fitting in there. I want to give a quick shout out to our super chat again, Malone. Thank you, sir. Remember what Francis said: proselytism is a grave sin against synodality. Okay. Now, I guess there is some movement, I guess you could say, on this issue, though. At least according to James Martin, he tweeted this out at the Italian Synod Assembly, the bishops over there, again headed by Zuppi. Again, Zuppi's already given his full support for Fiducia Supplicans, and he again was endorsed by a Mason to be the next pope. He's in charge of the Italian bishops here, and here's what the most recent document approved by the bishops of Italy says: "Quote: local churches overcoming the discriminatory attitudes sometimes widespread in ecclesial circles and in society, commit to promoting the recognition and support of homo-affective and transgender people, as well as their parents, who already belong to the Christian community." Now, this is Martin's own interpretation or translation of the document. I have not read it. I'm relying on him to what he said there. I mean, that's pretty bold. That's pretty big. That's more than just, that's not nothing,
They're obviously emboldened by Leo and what's happening in the Vatican right now. I mean, there can't be any doubt about it, and for good reason. I mean, they're moving the agenda forward. That's what synodality is all about. They're changing the doctrines, they're changing the practice, they're changing what supposedly the Catholic Church believes, and the rest of the world is buying it up, which is why our voices have to get louder and louder and louder, and we can't just sit back and let this happen and say, well, if they give us our traditional Latin Mass, we should just be happy with that and we'll be cool and don't make waves, because if you say anything about this stuff too loud, they might take the Mass away, and then that's why it matters. That's why this stuff matters.
Yeah, and I want to say thanks everybody for being here. We're at over 520 viewers. This is awesome, guys. This is a great milestone to be here tonight with all of you. Please leave your comments and questions, and we'll get to them as best as we can. We're going on 53 minutes, so we'll probably spend another 20 minutes or so as best we can to answer some more questions and to get through the rest of what we want to talk about. But you brought up this idea of being quiet to get the Latin Mass from Leo. I mean, I want to give you the floor because talking strategy these days is a very sensitive subject for some people who claim to have a monopoly on it.
Yeah.
And so I just want to, what do you think of what's going on lately on this front? It's pretty hostile out there.
Look, what happened was, and I think I said this before in our last show together, under Francis, a lot of the division among even the traditionalists was covered up a bit because everybody understood that Francis was a problem. Everybody still had their different takes on it. Some people said he wasn't the Pope because of the heresies. Some people said he wasn't the Pope because Benedict never resigned. But everybody, some people said, well, he is the Pope, but he's just the worst Pope ever in the history of the world. But at the end of the day, everybody kind of agreed that there was a real problem with Francis. But what happened was there was a large segment of people that said, well, we just have to wait for him to die. And then things are going to get better. And that was always the message from a large segment of people. Well, then Francis dies. And so then the assumption comes in, well, what's going to happen now is so much better. What I think this does is it exposes a fissure. It exposes the I don't know, that break within the traditional movement that was always there, but that was covered up between the time of Benedict, throughout the time of Francis, basically. I think it even existed under Benedict as well. There was a lot of dissent there, although I wasn't really around for those discussions. I think you might have been before I was. But basically, there is still this division where there's some people who say, we absolutely accept the Vatican Council. We accept the Vatican Council. There might have been some ambiguities in it. That's a way to excuse the errors and heresies. There's ambiguities in Vatican II. We just say they're ambiguous. And therefore, the real problem is that the crisis in the church is the suppression of the traditional Latin Mass. And so if we can get the restoration of the traditional Latin Mass, therefore we have a victory. There's other people that are more like myself, and maybe you, who say, no, the problem is much deeper than that. It's doctrinal. This raised its ugly, ugly head back at Vatican II. There's a difference in the faith. It's a difference in what we believe. It's a rejection of of Catholic tradition for a modernist reformulation of these things. And so the real crisis in the church is the fact that there are people in the hierarchy who have apparent apostolic authority who do not hold the faith. They don't hold the Catholic faith in its entirety. Sure, they may agree with a large portion of the doctrines and dogmas, but there are some points they don't. And so there's a divorce between a hierarchy and the faith. That's the crisis. The crisis is not the suppression of the traditional Latin Mass. The suppression of the traditional Latin Mass is a consequence of the crisis. That's my position. But what I'm saying is that division is still there. And I think what's happening now is that division is becoming exposed again. So we're going to have different strategies on how to deal with the problem because we don't agree on what the problem is.
I think, although I do think, though, there are people who do agree with that sentiment, and yet they will still say we should fight for the Latin Mass because it's like a stepping stone to that next phase. Because what you're asking for is like, what Bishop Sanborn often says is we need to burn the documents of Vatican II. Well, I mean, I guess I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. Some would say, well, if a pope does that and overnight changes the Novus Ordo, or and we have the Latin Mass, tomorrow, I mean, that's going to be practically a lot of potential issues might arise from that. And so you're like wanting a grand slam when we just need like a bunt single right now. Just give us a little Latin Mass. What do you say to those people who would hold that argument in response to what you just said?
I would say I used to think the same thing. I actually believe that as well, very much so. And what I realized after thinking about this, praying about this, discerning about this, and doing more research is that this essentially was the question back in 1988 at the time of Archbishop Lefebvre's consecration of the 4 bishops, in which there was significant disagreement and which created the Ecclesia Dei communities. And there were some people who said, look, if we just get the traditional Latin Mass, we're going to cooperate with Rome. We're going to get along with Rome. They'll give us the traditional Latin Mass, and things are going to be good. And I think at this point now, in hindsight, we have evidence, 30 years of evidence to show that doesn't work because the modernists care about the doctrine. We should care about the doctrine because it is the truth. The truth is what's going to set us free. And the traditional Latin Mass reflects the truth, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it is the truth. And that's what Archbishop Lefebvre's position was. And I think WM Review has had some really good articles publishing. I actually read one of them on my channel, publishing Archbishop Lefebvre's statements after the 1988 consecrations.
Nobody knows those two articles. They're very hidden. It's hard to find those ones.
They're hard, but now they're out there. And that's why I put it. I read it because I said, all right, well, maybe people don't want to read this, but I'm going to put it out there on audio. So at least it's out there on my YouTube channel. One of the letters, WM Review has them. And they're very important because that's Archbishop Lefebvre talking in that time period between 1988 and his death. So it was right after the consecrations. And he addresses this very argument. He addresses the issue we're dealing with now. He addresses this. He says, no, you can't just go for the Mass because they're just using, the modernists are just using that as a tool to control the narrative. And it works.
And to keep people away from going.
You can't do that. Right.
That's what they'll do. They'll introduce. Now, if my understanding is the SSPX actually asked for the Latin Mass to be freed, part of negotiations, but it seems that it was weaponized to keep people from going to them and to keep them. And this is what happens in the last 30 years, is that they will open up an indult in a SSPX community where there's a lot of trads where they know are going to that Latin Mass to lure them away, right? To make sure they don't go any further and keep entertaining what Lefebvre and others did too, right? This is big in Cincinnati too, where there's a lot of Sedevacantists parishes and stuff. And it's interesting to how it's happening. And I do think the Redemptorists, I just interviewed Father Michael Mary. I'm not sure if you saw that or read that statement over in Scotland. They were founded with the blessing of Lefebvre in 88. And then 2008, when Summorum Pontificum, right around that time when that came out, made a deal with Benedict. And they said, oh, the blessings of regular canonical situation is so great, and others who don't have this thing, they're missing out. And then now Father Michael Mary says it was a big mistake. We cannot coexist. It's two different churches.
Yeah, you can't coexist. And to be clear, nothing's wrong with saying we have a right to the traditional Latin Mass, because we do have a right to the traditional Latin Mass. No one has the right to take that away. That absolutely is a right that all Catholics have. That's our heritage. That is our faith. It's not just a disciplinary matter, as some people like to think. I mean, the Mass goes to the heart of the faith. However, when it's used as a condition for compromising on doctrine, that's when it that's the problem. And I do think that Archbishop Lefebvre stood strong on that. At this point, I mean, even though the SSPX might have asked, or been happy with Summorum Pontificum, whatever, you still can't compromise on the faith in order to get the traditional Latin Mass. That's a false compromise. And by the way, that's exactly what the Ecclesia Dei communities did back in 1988. So yes, they're still around. They're still saying masses. I mean, I've gone to the FSSP Mass quite a bit. I don't regularly go there now, but at the end of the day, let's be honest. Once the TLM is eliminated from the diocesan parishes, the FSSP and the Ecclesia Dei, formerly Ecclesia Dei communities, are going to be next on the chopping block. And I think their Traditionis Custodialis also limited their seminary, their ability to operate seminaries, or restrictions on that. So
yeah, Jerome brought that up here.
It's just, you're always compromised. You're always at a disadvantage. They took away all your leverage that you have, and that's part of why you can't compromise on that.
Well, this is why I put in a tweet too recently. I said, you want to talk strategy under Leo? I mean, how did How did St. John the Baptist approach strategy under Herod? How did St. Stephen approach strategy in front of the Sanhedrin? They spoke the truth, and God had them martyred. The greatest thing a human being could ever happen to them, right, at their death, the martyrdom for Christ, and that blood that they shed was a seed for the early church. And in my view, obviously Lefebvre was a white martyrdom, right? He was excommunicated, and Vigano in these times as well. And I could say all the other priests as well who are underground and seen as schismatic or excommunicated or whatever. I mean, the cloud of martyrdom weighs over them, right? They're operating basically as outcasts and lepers, right? And I think that is what's going to be the seed for the reconquista, right? For the reconquering of the church, not sitting here playing quiet, playing politics, and just talking about the beauty of the liturgy. Like, that's not counter-revolutionary. That's not what the saints did. Like, we got to just speak the truth. Like, what are we worried about? This is how Catholics have always behaved.
Yeah, you have to stand up and defend the truth. You can't say, well, we won't talk about this aspect of the truth if we can have our mass. You're giving all of the leverage up. You're compromising, quite frankly, on the truth, which is our Lord Jesus Christ, right? Who is the truth. And it's the truth that's going to set us free ultimately. So I think that's the key. And that's why my strategy is that you have to, in any strategy, you have to have a goal. And the goal has to be, one of the goals has to be the abrogation of Vatican II. And that has to be the top of what people are talking about. Not just the getting back the traditional Latin Mass in a diocesan parish. And so we have to focus on the problems with Vatican II. We have to talk about the truth. We have to make Novus Ordo people aware of these issues. Right now, at best you can tell, a person who goes to Novus Ordo parish might be aware that there's some people out there who like Latin in the Mass and have no idea of why that's important. They just think, well, they're just kind of old-fashioned and they like the Latin Mass. They don't even know the Latin Mass is different from their Mass. They just, I know because I used to think this, Stephen. I don't know if you were really a Novus Ordo guy. I don't think you were. Maybe
I was until I was 27. Yeah.
I used to think when I first heard about the Latin Mass that it was the same Mass just said in Latin.
That's
what I thought. I think that's Leo almost thinks that. Maybe not. I don't know.
That's right.
But that's why this stuff has to get into the Novus Ordo parishes. These discussions we have, a typical Novus Ordo pew sitter has to hear these things. And Francis knew that. And so that's why he wanted to make sure to get the traditional Latin Mass out of the diocesan parishes, because he didn't want traditionalists mixing with the 95% of the Novus Ordo attending Catholics. He didn't want them mixing, I believe, for that reason. So that therefore our strategy should be to do the opposite of what Francis wanted.
Yeah. Don here agrees with you. I thought that also, he says. So great avatar there. Who is that? Doctor, some Muppet or something. I can't remember.
Beaker.
There you go. Thanks everybody for being here. We're at 594 people who are viewing him. This is a fantastic showing. Thank you everybody for being here. Add your comments to the chat and we'll get to those as soon as we can. Maybe 10 or 15 more minutes here. We're going on over an hour. I guess my next two questions are, because I hear this a lot. And, somebody, they'll say to us or what have you done? I mean, you're not there at the Pontificum pilgrimage in Rome. You're just sniping behind a computer screen. You're just criticizing. It seems like you're just dividing. You're not building coalitions. You're not building things up. Is that what you're doing? How do you respond to that question?
Yeah, no, I'm not building coalitions. Guilty as charged. I'm not building coalitions. You know why I don't build coalitions? Because I don't build coalitions with people who reject the truth and reject the faith and reject our Lord Jesus Christ. It's the same reason I don't build coalitions when it comes to matters of faith with Hindus. It's the same reason I don't build coalitions when it comes to matters of faith with Protestants. Yeah, I think part of the problem is that building coalitions means everybody has to shut up and suppress the truth and compromise on the truth in order to get along. And that's not advancing the truth. I most certainly want to make a point. I want to argue. I want to advocate for the truth. And I want to win people over. I want people to see the truth, and I want to win them over. And I understand I'm not going to win everybody over. And there's a lot of other people out there who are more articulate and better than I am at it. And so I'm happy to refer people to those people, which I do all the time. But the point is that I just want to get the truth out there, and that ultimately necessarily means there's going to be division, and that's okay with me.
So, I mean, it sounds like Father Salvani's strategy, right? Liberalism is a sin, that we are anti-liberals. We don't need a large group of people to do what God wants us to do in these times. And I think that's at the heart of what you're saying. And I agree with that, because people will say, well, what are you doing? Well, just because you're not at a single Summorum Pontificum pilgrimage in the Vatican in 2025 doesn't mean you're not playing a role in trying to save the church. I mean, I can't tell you how many priests I know, how many women religious I know, how many lay people I know who are out here building churches, who are offering up the insults that come their way every day, right? I mean, how many times have you been attacked on Twitter, right? How many times have I been attacked on Twitter? And we have to offer those up. And when someone asks, like, what have you done? To me, it's like a heart-wrenching question, because I'm like, oh, like they only see one thing that you have to do. And it's like, go out and do this activism or go put on a conference. And like, that's the only way to help the traditional movement. Like whatever happened to like St. Therese's little way, or about offering up all the things that we can do every day to restore the church. This is why I think, honestly, why St. Therese was sent to us at the beginning of the 1900s is that the future is going to be very grim. We're not going to be able to make a large difference. All we can really do is going to clean your room and vacuum for the glory of God. And he's going to use that to save the church. And I think that's my response to that question. I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that or not, but I don't like being asked that, because it's like, well, oh, if you don't do this or that, you're not helping. I think that's a very prideful, un-Catholic way to look at this.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say this about anybody, even those who I totally disagree with. I mean, I don't know what people do in their private time. I don't know how much time they spend in prayer. I don't know how much money they're donating to this organization or that organization. I don't know if they have to work 50 to 60 hours a week to support a family, and they don't have time to go out and attend conferences, or the money to attend conferences, or the time to go down and protest at a church somewhere. I have no idea. I think you just have to do what you're able to do. I mean, I have a lot of health issues going on in my immediate family right now. That's why I haven't been able to do videos very much the last 2 weeks. You have to take care of your situation in your life. You have to make sure yourself and your family get to heaven, obviously. But the reason why I spend the little amount of time that I do fighting for the church and fighting for the truth at a sort of a broader level is because I also know that those issues, Vatican II, heresy, the modernism, has affected the entire church, and it has affected souls. It's affected people in my immediate family. Honestly, I get very angry about this, because I don't know about you. I come from a Catholic family, at least on my dad's side. Yeah. And how many people, a very large Italian Catholic family, and how many of them have lost the faith? How many of them don't go to mass anymore? And this can, much of it can be traced back to Vatican II and modernism. And so that angers me. I think it's righteous anger, but I get angry about it, because I'm like, these are people in my family that are being affected by this. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm doing what I can, and I know you're doing what you can. And so when people say, well, what are you doing? Well, I can sit and try to tell you what I'm doing, but it doesn't really matter. You just do what you can do, and what it is what it is. I don't know.
I did watch a podcast the other night, and I thought it was very edifying. It was TLM Ryan, Sede Picante, excuse me, and James Green. And these guys are a bit younger than myself and you. And I understand where they're coming from, and I want to reach out to them and actually have private conversations and pick their brains on a few things, because they're seeing a lot of the sniping back and forth, that me and you are taking at others, and then we're receiving. And it's like, hey, like, the enemy in Rome, the modernist Vatican, they're united, right? The modernists are together. And then you look at the trads and they're just all sort of sniping at each other. And I understand the desire to have like a united front. But like my initial response is, well, without, and Bishop Williamson always used to say this. He says, why is there division in the SSPX? And there is. People don't understand there's conservatives and liberals in the SSPX even too. And in tradition all over, it's because the man in white in the Vatican doesn't have his head screwed on straight. This is how the church works. You can't really have unity in the church without the hierarchy functioning properly. And I think so like you said a minute ago, like every one of us has their own sort of role to play. And we're all going to focus on different things. Like Dr. Kwasniewski, who I know and have known, like his specialty obviously is liturgy and like chant and singing, right? Like he knows that stuff very, very well. Others have a different area of expertise. Right. And I think like my focus is, I just think it's inevitable that we're all going to be sort of fighting with each other because, well, one, we're men and we believe in principles and we believe like, in a crusade. And the implicit argument that those guys are sort of making, and maybe not knowing it, is because they're seeing like for the first time ever, like trads pushing back against Trad Inc. And we're proposing an alternative way forward. And people are saying you're being divisive, you're being negative, and they don't like that. When in reality, I've always equated it to like Pat Buchanan trying to take the Republican nomination from George Bush in 92. Like it's needed because this guy is selling this entire Republican Party out to globalists, to open borders, etc. So like we have to have this battle because like our ends are not the same and we don't see it right in the same way. So, and again, like I would say the division comes from them. Michael Mack kicked out Vigano of the trad movement, and no one reports on him anymore. Okay. So this is both ways. Like we got to see this as a two-way street. It's not just like we're the little guys throwing stones. It's a much bigger problem.
And let's be honest. I mean, it sharpens the knives, right? I mean, it sharpens the knives. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the pushback we're getting from the Trad Inc. guys have forced me to research and look at things that I haven't had to do before. It's a process of sharpening the knives and ultimately getting to the truth. And like you said, I mean, yeah, I have no problem. Dr. K is total expert on the history of liturgy or whatever, and that's fine. When it comes to Vatican II, he's off he's off in the wilderness. I've noticed in a lot of the trad discussions that I see it all the time. It's like people are like super, super right on like one issue, and then it'll be totally wrong, in my opinion, on something else. And so, you just take people for what you take them for what they are. They're really knowledgeable and good on some things. They're totally off base on the other things. I've had my mind changed on a few things, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping to change the mind on a few other people, quite frankly. And what you were saying is totally right about what Bishop Williamson said is part of the reason this is all happening is because of the crisis in the church. So this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody when you have an absent father. And so whether you want to call Leo the Pope or Leo's an anti-pope, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because we don't have a father who's leading us and serving that role of being uniting in the faith. Mm-hmm. That's the problem and why all this stuff is happening. So
one thing I do want to give credit to those guys. I do want to have a conversation with them. And I respect anyone who enters this arena and is trying to get out there and put forward solutions. I'm not judging any of those guys for their comments. I do enjoy them. I watched the whole interview. I thought it was great. And one thing I do really appreciate James on is his great comedy, his satire. Well, this is from Everett Polinsky. I think James works with him. This was, I think, pretty hilarious. He says, Trump mediates peace deal between SPX and FSSP. And he also made this, Everett Polinsky. Vatican issues congratulations to Cranmer and his becoming Archbishop of Canterbury. And I do think there's a big opportunity here for the satire, for the comedy to sort of lighten the mood.
Yeah.
I do Meme Monday at our Substack.
Yeah, you have great memes, by the way. Meme Monday is really good.
I just find them; they're not mine. Some people need to understand.
No, I know, but I mean, you do a good job of collecting them or whatever. You're sort of like the aggregator of trad Catholic memes. It's really good. So, yeah, it's great.
As important, I think let's have some levity on these times. We can't always be doing 2-hour podcasts on the most intricate things, inventing. But I think last thing we'll end with this last topic because we haven't just gotten to it yet. I want to throw in here the visit from who is this guy? Charles, right? The imposter king over there in the UK went to St. Paul outside the walls. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously it's scandalous. Obviously it's ridiculous.
My thought on it was, if King Henry VIII today applied for that annulment, do you think he'd get it? Even
yes.
Yeah, do you think he'd get it?
Yeah.
Of course he would get it.
Yeah.
That's why, because our doctrine has changed, and so Henry VIII would have gotten his annulment, and all of this division between the Anglicans and the Catholic Church could have just been totally avoided if the Church had just given him his annulment, even though it wasn't actually the right thing to do. So, yeah, there is division, and division is part of life, and is part of what Christ taught us in the gospel. And I just think at the end of the day, as Catholics, what we're going to be judged on individually is whether we compromise the truth, which is our Lord Jesus Christ, the truth. He is the truth in the way. Are we compromising on that, or are we going to defend the truth and fight for the truth? Are we willing to get our head chopped off like St. Thomas More? And so that's what I thought when I saw all of that.
Yeah, I think Vigano had a really good take again as well. And he said, like you had the head of the Synodal Church and the head of the Church of England, and the great thing that was missing was the Catholic religion. And they marched under the banner of their love for the environment. And he said, look, if Clement the Seventh headed the Catholic Church, what kind of church does Leo head? A church that with both words and actions disavows and betrays the entire magisterium of the popes up to Pius XII. The ecumenical environmentalist prayer in the Sistine Chapel sanctions the abdication of the Roman papacy, and this is, I think, the best part, the humiliation of the Catholic Church before a heretical, concubine-keeping globalist Freemason who retains the title of Defensor Fidei while prostrating himself before Islam and celebrating Mohammedan festivals. I mean, I don't know anyone who speaks like that anymore. It's so brilliant. Vigano is so on point. Like every tweet is just, it's like an encyclical.
Yeah, he's right. And I mean, and I'll just leave you with this. I mean, and kind of bring the whole thing full circle. It is all about synodality. It is about synodality, and what is synodality about? It's about the breakdown of the hierarchy. It's about the breakdown of the office of the papacy, which a lot of people have a hard time understanding. Like, well, why would the Pope be working against his own office? But actually, that's very much a part of the program, is a deconstruction of the structure and the hierarchy of the Church, which includes a deconstruction of the papacy, which makes total sense why then there's no problem with getting along and compromising on important matters in doctrine with Eastern Orthodox and the Anglicans. So kind of bring that, wrap that around, put a bow on that package for you.
Wonderful. Well, Catholic Esquire was our guest for today's show, everybody. Do go and visit him on X. I'll bring that up just a second here. We've covered quite a bit of ground. I don't think we've missed anything, but any other last thoughts with our audience today? I think this was the best stream we've done so far. In fact, it's only our second one, so there's not much to gauge it against, but 647 viewers right now.
Oh, great.
You guys are fantastic. This is going very, very well here. Anything else to add here?
No, just thanks for having me. And I just would like to say, please we are born at this time for a reason. It's very frustrating. And what we see in the Church, I know it's very depressing. And I felt those things as well. And sometimes I felt like I just want to give up and not talk about this anymore. But at the end of the day, we are here for a reason. We each have our own skills to offer. And I think the Lord wants us to use those in order to advance the kingdom, advance the gospel, and advance the kingship of our Lord Jesus Christ. Happy Feast of Christ the King to everybody. And thank you, Stephen, for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll pray for all the health issues going on in your family. So everybody keep Esquire's situation in your prayers. We, again, thank you for being with us here. This was an hour and a half almost here going live. We'll continue to do these if you find them enjoyable. I think it's a good use of time and better than watching all the junk out there that you would otherwise see on the cable news and just awful, mainstream media, so-called entertainment these days. It's just despicable. And so thanks for being here, and we will keep you in our prayers. Do follow us on Twitter as well. Go to our Substack and follow us, obviously, here on YouTube. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night, and God bless.